What I will do is I'll ask you to introduce yourself for the camera, please.
I'm Gerry Firkins. I attended Sheffield University between 1973 and 1974, after which I was officially given 2 years to come back, but never did. So I came up to the university in 73 with my parents. They dropped me on the 1st of October on Western Bank and drove away. And I was left here with £35 and £20 note. £35 grant out of 485, which was the full grant that year, and £20 note for my father. He had found out because I'd told my mother that I was gay, and he disapproved, and he wouldn't fund my lifestyle. So he reluctantly agreed to sign my form, my UCO application form, to let me come to Sheffield, but so disapproved that he wouldn't give me any money, which meant that almost within 1 week of being here, having spent £35 on books for the chemistry course, I had no money left, and so I had to start work, and I managed to get a job in the West End Hotel, which is now Doctor's Orders, I think it's called. And in those days, just to put things in perspective, beer was 14 pence a pint. The first pint I pulled in 1973 would have been 14 pence, and it was Tetley's, so, which you don't see any longer. The set hours for the chemistry course in those days was 35 a week. So it was impossible virtually to work every evening and all weekends and do a course of that weight. And I quickly got into trouble, and also eventually the West End closed, I think, for a refurbishment, and I was without any money, so much so that I couldn't eat, and I had to go to the union, and kindly the union gave me a loan of, I think, £5, which fed me for a few days. And then I had similar problems later, and I ended up going to the university, and they gave me some more cash to cover me in an emergency. And then I think I had one more supply from university, and the third time I went they said they couldn't help any longer. And I remember feeling so alone and bereft on the steps of the Western Bank building that somebody picked me up and took me to student health, because I was in a rather rough state, and they eventually excused me from the course when they understood what the situation was, gave me 2 years off, and I eventually went to work for NatWest. So it was a traumatic time for me, and this was all caused by my father's disapproval of gay rights and his association with failures. My mother did in fact say to me, because I was gay, I would never come to anything. So I got disapproval from both parents. So I was left really without anybody. I didn't know anybody in Sheffield other than, and I'll give him a shout out here, the son of my old headmaster, because he had worked with my parents on his placement as a social worker as part of his course, and he was in his final year here, and in fact, because accommodation was so bad in 73, 74, I don't know whether you've seen the reports, people were camping out. They were in tents because there was no accommodation for students It was that bad. I actually slept on his floor until I found a flat where my rent was £4 a week, I think. Yeah, £4 a week, and I had a slot machine for power and gas. So, prepayment meter, which was tatty and awful, and not a happy place. Fortunately, in those days, Graves had a restaurant that supplied food, and so my total nutrition was dependent upon Graves and the Union. So I'm very grateful to the Union for lots of things, for the loans, for the support I got from, but tell you where I got lots of support from, and that was the women's group. They were very supportive, because obviously they were in a similar state of tackling prejudice and inappropriate behaviour. But the women's group were very helpful. And then we moved on to a moment when there was a motion being proposed, because I was in touch with one or two people who were gay, because I'd seen an advert for Gay Soc, and I'd eventually found them. They had met in the Star and Garter, which was the pub very close to the main library here, that is now finished and gone and closed and been replaced by flats, I think. But they used to meet inside, and how you were supposed to find somebody in a pub in a main room, I had no idea. This was ridiculous as far as I was concerned. I'd come from London, where things were very different, and there was a bit more openness, and so this was slightly strange for me. But I eventually found somebody, and they put forward a motion to the Union, which said, "We believe in gay rights." It was as simple as that. I think that's the correct wording, though you may be able to verify it later. And I decided I wanted to speak, because I felt an injustice had been done to me, and so I wanted to speak up for all those people who didn't have the guts to come out, be open and honest, because there was so much hidden in those days. I think the original estimates by Kinsey were that there were 1 in 10 people who were gay, but actually only about 1 in 100 actually admitted it. So it was very, very much a hidden game, and I wanted to say to people, it is actually now quite safe to come out, though it turned out later this wasn't the case for me either, but as we'll come to. So there was a motion, and in the middle of it I got heckled badly by one of the members of the Communist Party, who thought I was speaking for the opposition, just misunderstood and started heckling me, so I sort of had to heckle back a bit, and eventually he came up and apologised afterwards. So a slight misunderstanding, so it didn't go well, but we did win the day, and the motion the House believes in gay rights was passed, and eventually that therefore was adopted by Council, the Union Council, and was the first time that it had been achieved, which felt like a bit of progress. And gradually I think the Students' Union, the National Students' Union, began to move more on the issue. As a result of my situation, I became a poster boy, if you like, for the National Union of Students' cause for getting mandatory full grants. And whether there is any artifact left of that, I don't know, but I was asked to go to a National Union Students meeting, which I didn't actually, because I couldn't actually, because I was working, because I was trying to earn some money, so I couldn't go. But I did go on a gay rights demo in '74, and I was determined to make something more of Gay Soc. I decided, once I had been elected in '74 to become its chair, to bring Gay Soc inside the union and actually hold meetings in a room that could be identified. So join us at, and so people could find us, because I had difficulty. So I was trying to correct that. And we met in a room. I have to say that didn't go brilliantly the first time, because there was abuse. We're banging on the door and saying, "You puffs in there," etc. So it was rather unpleasant, but we endured it, and it disappeared in the end. We actually made posters. A lovely lass whose name I can't remember made some glorious posters that were slightly in the style of Aubrey Beardsley, come Art Deco, of that sort of ilk, to put up around the union to say join us at Gay Soc. And I think we got 1 or 2 members but people needed to be brave then, and there weren't that many people about to do it. So we were about a group of 8, and that was it. I've got to be honest, it wasn't very big. Out of that, we decided to hold a disco. All sorts of societies did, and we thought, well, why not? We'll have a Gay Soc disco. And people were very nervous about doing this, because that meant coming out and being visible elsewhere rather than just in your little room. And we decided to go for it, and one of the dear lecturers from the university who joined us, a chap by the name of Philip, whose surname I can't remember, I'm afraid, he sat on the door, so he braved the door on the night. It was held in March 74, and it was the first one. We had 35 people present, and we made £5 profit, and that went into the funds for more sort of advertising and so on, and poster printing that we needed to do for the following year. And of course, out of that disco, another one was held the following year, and so it became a regular event once a year, and then eventually, ultimately, it became what was Climax, and now is I think it's still a regular feature of events at the Union. So and so that was 74, so we're coming up to the 50th anniversary next year of that. I just felt that people ought to know how it started, where it was, and so on. The event was held in Sally's Coffee Lounge, which is now very different to what it was. It was rather sort of stark and brutal at the time, and with 35 people trying to dance in a huge room looked a little bit pathetic, I'm sure. But in order to hold the disco in Sally's Coffee Bar, I had to go to the university authorities to book it, because the building is owned by the university, and it was then managed by them totally, and so they did the letting. I went up to see the chap whose office was on the very top floor of University House, and I said I wanted to book a disco for a society, and he said fine, and he said what date you're thinking of, and we agreed on a date. And then he said, "And which society?" And I said, "Gay Soc." And he went, "Oh, I don't think we can do that. I'm going to have to get permission." And he wouldn't say yes or no at that point, and he had to go away to the university authorities, get approval for Gay Soc to book a room. And that's how we were treated, as sort of not lesser mortals than everybody else. And that made me very angry, and fueled my motivation to keep Gay Soc going, to fight such injustice. But it was a difficult moment. In selling tickets for the disco, which was not an easy thing, I actually approached some of my friends from chemistry, and one of those chaps took against me. He had a drink or two in the bar when I chanced my arm, and he physically attacked me and eventually threw me over a chair. And I was quite bruised and had my pride dented. but it still went ahead and so on. So at that point I really lost touch with anybody in chemistry because I was now an outcast from that group, and that finally finished off any chance of going anywhere with the subject. The people I got to know better came out of the debate that we had over the motion on gay rights. After that, I met two people in the bar who were talking about it and saying it was really good of you to do that sort of thing and so on. I said, well, I really want to make sure that other people can come out and so on. And one of those two actually did come out there and then and said, yeah, and he'd got a girlfriend. But I got to know them as a result of that intimate moment, and I used to meet them in the coffee bar, which was at the base of the Arts Tower. I don't know whether it still exists now, whether the coffee bar is still there, but we used to, so rather than actually going and doing chemistry lectures, towards the end I ended up going down there, and actually they were my support network. And thank God for English literature, because I'm not sure what would have happened without them. And I eventually actually lodged with one as well, so that was really important. I'd like to see something that shows how far we've come, to be honest, that somehow crystallises how difficult it was and the benefits and changes have been made, but then also maybe shows what needs to be done. There are still areas of inequality that could be addressed and should be addressed, and I think I'd like to see a bit of where we are in the scheme of things, progress plus outstanding issues. There are people out there who will help you. People were supportive of me even in the days of it being so tough, and you know, I've survived. I didn't get a degree. I've never gone back and got a degree, but I ended up with having a very senior post in the NHS, and so therefore achieved a sort of an academic element in my own way. And yes, it was long and it was a struggle, but keep going, because things do happen and the light does come on in the end. I'd like to see them speaking up for those who haven't got the courage. There are always going to be those on the edge who are undecided about what to do and where to go and how to handle things, and it's those people that in 73, 74 I felt I needed to be in support of, and I think that's still the case, because they don't go away. There are always those that need a bit of reassurance, and I would like to see a bit more of them being supportive of that. I think it is for us to pass on. We were probably all in that position at some point, and once we have learnt that, then we in turn need to go and support those going forward.